So base training, as far as endurance sports goes, is a period of time where you're working on your endurance, your durability, and your resilience. The goal is to improve your aerobic capacity, improve the strength of your soft tissues, like ligaments and tendons, as well as your muscular endurance, right? Your ability to go longer and longer. This would also be the time that you would be wrapping up your maximum strength phase if you're engaged in a periodized strength training plan. So we'll talk about that at the end. So base training in in the books is going to be a period of 8 to 12 weeks in a season that's 6 to 7 month long, and you could have multiple seasons within a year. And during this time, you're going to be progressively increasing your duration of workouts. It could be that you're going from a 30-minute run to an hour long run by the end of the base period, which is fine. It all depends on where you're at. Um, with an Ironman athlete, especially a returning Ironman athlete, probably in the base training phase, they're going to get up to some long, easier, like low intensity 6 or 7 hour rides. Mileage may vary depending on speed and their ability. Some 2.5 hour runs easily within question. So this would be some longer but like lower effort intensity. So let me tell you how this is structured. Typically, if you have a lot of time, you're going to have 2 or 3 weeks where you're slightly increasing your duration or total time per week, and then you're going to have a recovery week. I haven't talked about recovery yet in any of the other videos. Recovery is important. It's part of training. It's when your body heals up. It allows your mind and body to recover. And so every third or fourth week is going to be a lighter week. Now, that doesn't mean you're taking the whole week off. A recovery week could be 2 or 3 easy days where you just do like a short run, a short swim, a short bike, and then it could be right back into some long stuff on the weekends. So it all depends on the athlete. But in these 3 weeks or 2 weeks prior to the recovery week, it's hard to say examples because everybody's different. But you're going to be mostly like 90 to 95% is going to be endurance or zone one and two, right? You hear a lot about zone two training, and this is the bulk of where you're going to be doing all that. However, you're going to be doing zone two training throughout the whole thing. And then the other 5 or 10% could be some higher intensity. So, and by high intensity, I mean strides, short intervals, probably not a whole lot of like maximum intervals, like max power intervals, but some zone three and four intervals for experienced athletes would be acceptable. Newer athletes aren't going to really want to do any intervals, and the time that you're going to ask a new athlete to do is going to be low, or a returning athlete. Like if you were a great swimmer or runner 20 years ago and you haven't done much since then, you you need to start at zero. You can't go out and run 5 or 6 miles and expect everything to be okay. You have to allow your body time to get strong, build the endurance so that you don't get injured, because it's very easy to precipitate a acute injury, tearing a ligament or tendon, because you overstressed yourself, not being prepared for it, right? So base training is meant to set you up for the next phase of training, which would be the build phases where you're getting into higher intensity, race intensity, over race intensity, things like that. All right, back to some specifics. With a newer athlete, you could say they say they have 5 to 8 hours to commit per week. That's great. You might not even meet that, but if everything's going well, maybe they do 2 or 3 hours the first week, 3 or 4 hours the second week. And a new athlete, I would just have recover and do 2 or 3 hours the third week and cycle them through that kind of rotation 3 or 4 times until they've proven a few things. One, they can stick to the schedule because consistency is key. And two, they're not having any trouble. They're adapting, right? They're getting stronger, muscular endurance is improving, mental strength is there, fortitude is there, all these things that are super important. and then you could move on to the next phase and start including light intervals and things like that. But if you're a new or returning athlete, don't jump back into intervals because it's a bad idea. It's an easy way to get hurt. Now, experienced athletes, maybe they had a full season last year, have had multiple seasons, very easily can get back into some higher volume, 12, 14, even 16, 18-hour weeks, uh, as long as they've recovered enough to do so, right? Because if we finish a race and then we take 2 weeks off and then we're like, okay, coach, I want to get right back into a big build phase or big, base phase, you'd be like, I don't know if that's the best idea, right? That's another subject. That's a transition period. That's an off-season training. But after they're ready to go, right? Then we can get back into some big weeks. Now, for these returning athletes that have experience at higher levels of intensity, it's okay to include short amounts of race pace or higher level intensity in the base period because the bulk of your training is going to be aerobic, right? Zone 1 and 2. However, you can put a little harder effort at the top there, provided they're recovering well, they have no trouble, no injuries, things like that. And in my book, we're talking 15 to 20 minutes of higher intensity running. That would be like interval running, 3 by a mile, 10 by 400s, things like that, at 5K, 10K pace. Maybe some half marathon progression efforts in the long run, provided that it's not overtaxing them and they're not burned out mentally and that they have the fortitude to be able to do this, into the future, right? If you're questioning the ability of an athlete to say, I need you to run, 10 miles with the last 4 at half marathon pace, are they going to be able to do that in 10 weeks or will you have burned them out? So you need to know the athlete. As far as cycling goes, you know, 30 minutes a week of higher intensity, talking zone 4, that FTP 90-95% range. If they can do it without trouble, that's great. If you just want to include like 80 to 85% range, the zone 3 or tempo, that's fine. The occasional group ride, things like that. But with these experienced athletes, we're talking about people that may be riding 100 or 200 miles a week, and doing a 20-mile, harder session is nothing to really sneeze at. They're not gonna have to sleep for 2 days, right? So those are the caveats with higher intensity in base training. Base training is going to be 2 or 3 rounds of it: base 1, base 2, base 3, with each of those rounds being 3 or 4 weeks generally. Maybe you have a young athlete who's super awesome and they go 4 weeks on, 1 week off. Most of your 50-year-old plus athletes are going to want to do like a 2 week on, 1 week off. There's exceptions to that, obviously. And you're in your 25 to 45 range. Most of them can get away with a 3 week on, 1 week off, provided that, life allows that they're not too busy, they don't get too tired, they sleep enough, et cetera, et cetera. Lots of other issues. Now, the strength. If you are incorporating strength, which absolutely you should, into your year-round training, maximum strength is when you're doing high weight, low rep, right? You're going for strength gains, which does help with the power equation. And you would want to wrap that up in base 2 or base 3, and then just go into strength maintenance. And so we're talking about your traditional like heavy lifts, squats, deadlifts, bench press, lat pull down, pull up reps, things like that. After that, you're going to be doing a lot more high intensity in your build and peak phases, and you don't want to be breaking yourself down extensively with strength training during those periods of time. So, base training, 2 or 3 rounds, newer athletes, no intervals, experienced athletes wrapping up maximum strength, and some limited amount of higher intensity. All right, thank you. Hope that helps.